Welcome back to Nyakra's Anime Gaming. You probably know Undertale, one of the most beloved indie games ever made. Cozy and familiar at first, but also full of soul-crushing moments. For the record, Undertale wasn't made in RPG Maker, it was built with Game Maker Studio. So why am I talking to Undertale fans? Because many RPG Maker horror classics pull the same emotional tricks. Soft, pixelated 2D surfaces that hide brutal themes, cryptic symbolism, and gut punch moments you'll never forget. Just a quick warning before we begin. Some of these titles are extremely dark and deal with heavy, depressing themes. Or, to put it in Sans words, you're gonna have a bad time. With that out of the way, let's dive into our first entry, Yume Nikki. It might look like a simple adventure where you explore dream worlds and collect abilities, but the deeper you go, the more its silence starts to speak louder than words. There's almost no dialogue. The boxes rarely appear, and when they do, it doesn't feel like anyone's talking to you. Most NPCs just make noises or react in strange ways, which only adds to the feelings of isolation. The dreamscapes are bizarre and uncanny. Eyes watching you, hands reaching out, and landscapes that shift in ways that are equal parts fascinating and unsettling. Secrets hide everywhere, with many optional areas and events that only happen under certain conditions. Madotsuki never leaves her room, and the game never tells you why. But considering the context of Japan's hikikomori phenomenon, everything becomes heartbreakingly sharp. After wandering through Madotsuki's unsettling dreams, let's shift to a game that balances dread with tense, action-driven moments. Angels of Death. Its story is divided into episodes, each designed to stand on its own and short enough to finish in one sitting. Perfect for quick, suspenseful bursts of horror. Each episode spotlights a different boss, with unique aesthetics and game mechanics. The cast is memorable and visually striking, but it's the evolving bond between Rachel and Zack that gives the story its uniqueness. The gameplay feels more modern than the usual RPG Maker horror formula, blending chase sequences, environmental puzzles, and cinematic moments into the story. Kathy's floor was my favorite. Her traps looked overwhelming at first, but the generous time limits let me figure things out, and solving them felt rewarding. She left such an impression that I wished she had more time in the spotlight. As an episodic, character-driven horror thriller, Angels of Death is stylish, tense, and absolutely worth playing, with bits of foreshadowing that pay off nicely if you're paying attention. Okay, those two first games are pretty dark and well known in the RPG Maker community, so now let's check out something a little lighter but still creepy, weird, and maybe one you haven't seen before. Mannequins running after you, creepy head statues everywhere, a little girl and a tall blue-haired guy trapped inside a scary, lonely artsy place at night. Oh wait, that's not Ib. You probably already know that one. I'm talking about Anne. If you liked Ib, this one is definitely worth a look. Instead of just paintings and galleries, Anne feels more contemporary. USB flash drives, file transfers, vending machines, elevators, all these little digital touches make it feel modern, while still keeping that classic RPG Maker horror vibe. The game is split into chapters, each with its own boss and story beat. It's short enough to replay and get all endings, and yet, it still gives you that feeling of slowly uncovering the truth. Built in RPG Maker MZ, it looks and moves smoother than many older titles, while still feeling nostalgic. It's not as heavy or haunting as the other titles featured here, but it's still an engaging experience. And once you've made it through Anne, there's this subtle reminder that someone important was there all along, even when the world seemed indifferent. Speaking of being remembered, that feeling carries us right into our next game, OneShot. At first glance, it looks like just another polished RPG Maker game. But the deeper you go, the more it reveals itself as something profoundly personal. A story about entropy, solipsism, and the search for meaning. What surprised me most is how personal and alive it feels. Miko gets scared, tired, hungry, even sleepy, and slowly starts to feel less like a character, more like a friend. The game makes you care, and it remembers. On my replay for this review, years after my first run, I accidentally triggered a secret ending, and it recalled choices from all the way back then. It even remembered my name, despite me playing on a different computer, thanks to Steam Cloud. It felt like the game itself hadn't forgotten me. The meta puzzles are clever, sometimes even asking you to step outside the game and mess with its own files, and it gives you the sense the story isn't tied to the screen. And while the themes touch on existential dread, the journey is surprisingly hopeful. By the end, it was fulfilling, but I couldn't help feeling a little sad that it was over. OneShot isn't really a game you play only once, despite its name. It reshapes itself on replay and reminds you that in some way, we keep existing as long as someone remembers we've been here. After that, let's go back to darker experiences. It's not me. It's my basement. Yes, that's the title. It asks the obvious question up front. What's in that basement? And builds its story and suspense around it. One of the few interesting titles I've seen made with RPG Maker MV. It explores anxiety, feelings of not belonging, and guilt without ever spelling everything out. The house feels fun, artsy, and childish even. But as soon as you step outside, the contrast is clear. The world feels dead and muted. NPCs pass by you like ghosts, making you feel just as isolated and hopeless as the protagonist. There are some illustrated CGs that made me think of visual novels. One character I particularly loved was Dr. Delight. He seems to be very caring, attentive, fun, and wholesome, and isn't afraid to ask the real questions or face life head on. He feels like that rare person who tries to help when you've convinced yourself no one can. It's free, it's short, and it leaves a lot to think about long after it ends. The game claims there's just one ending, but is there really? From here, we move to something that starts deceptively small and slowly rewrites everything you thought you knew. Hello, Charlotte. The first episode might look like a typical RPG Maker project. Teddy bears chasing you, some simple puzzles, but that surface is merely an invitation. What makes this series stand out is the sheer intentionality. Almost nothing is there by accident. Mundane objects like soap and ink carry a heavy symbolic weight. The lore is dense, and the game has a rich backstory. The characters are charming and feel like real friends. Even the house itself constantly shifts shape and style, and every change has an in-lore explanation. This is a story built on meta-narrative. Its horror isn't just in grotesque imagery, but in the way it makes you question whether you were ever truly in control. Beneath that, it explores themes of anxiety, psychosis, and a harsh reflection on whether your worth can be measured by what you produce. More than once, characters find themselves spiraling when the world convinces them they have failed to measure up. Hello, Charlotte is grotesque, yet precise, patient, yet merciless to surface readings. If you love literary references, layered meta-narratives, and stories that demand a reread with fresh eyes, you might fall in love with this one. The house has 11 floors. There's no going back if you press the 11F button by accident. And what better way to close this journey than with end roll? I'm not talking about credits though. End roll lays its premise bare right from the start, but its true impact comes from how it keeps adding layers to that cruel truth. The more you explore, the more your view of its characters shifts in messy, painful, complicated ways. It's a story about guilt, jealousy, life, death, and the heavy weight of our choices. Its symbolism is blunt and unsettling, with enemy designs full of meaning. There's also a surprising amount of optional content, secret bosses in hidden areas, making its world feel bigger than you would expect. Fair warning, the tone gets very dark and cruel, with graphic and deeply disturbing themes. Segawa, the creator, asks that videos include a content warning. If heavy negativity hits you hard, this one might not be for you. But if you can handle it, End Roll is one of the most unforgettable free RPG Maker experiences out there. And that wraps up our look at 7 RPG Maker games that will crush our soul. If any of them caught your attention, I've left links in the description where you can download and try the free titles. Thank you so much for watching. And just between us Undertale fans, I skipped Nefsabluk and nobody was harmed in my run after Papyrus. He's my favorite Undertale character, and when he spared me, I almost immediately clicked spare. Turns out he proved I still had a soul, even after surviving all these games.